Hello, my friends. Today we are starting with something unexpected. Trump decided to call Putin. This came as a surprise to many, especially since he had previously expressed dissatisfaction with the negotiations and Putin's actions. After their latest phone call, Trump made a public statement. I just finished a full call with President Vladimir Putin. The call lasted about an hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the attack on Russian aircraft by Ukraine, as well as various other attacks carried out by both sides. It was a good conversation, but not one that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin did say very firmly that he would have to respond to the recent airfield attacks. We also talked about Iran and the fact that time is running out for Iran to make a decision on nuclear weapons, a decision that needs to be made quickly. I told President Putin that Iran must not have nuclear weapons, and I believe we were in agreement on that. President Putin suggested he would be involved in talks with Iran and that he might help bring a quick resolution. I believe Iran is moving too slowly on this very important matter, and we need a final answer very soon. After posting this statement, Trump deleted it, then reposted it again. Apparently, he had doubts about sharing it publicly. But after that, he shared a link to a Washington Post article about imposing sanctions on Russia. Here is what the article said. Clearly, Putin doesn't want peace. He needs to be forced to stop the war. To do that, Trump needs more leverage. Congress can give it to him by passing a sanctions law against Russia, wrote columnist Mark Titten. Still, I think it's important to realize that Putin has long known sanctions would be coming, and he's deliberately escalating because he understands that the sanctions won't hit Russia as hard as many people hope they would. Additionally, Putin personally made a statement regarding the attacks on the railways.
The recent sabotage of railway lines in the Bryansk and Kursk regions is undoubtedly a terrorist act. The decisions to carry out such crimes were, of course, made in Ukraine at the political level. What I'd like to point out in this regard is that, unfortunately, civilians always suffer during armed conflicts. But what happened in the Bryansk region, was a deliberate strike on civilians. And under all international norms, such actions are considered crimes. All the crimes committed against civilians, including women and children, on the eve of another round of peace talks we proposed in Istanbul, were undoubtedly aimed at disrupting the negotiation process. The strike was intentionally carried out against the civilian population. This only confirms our fear that the already illegitimate regime in Kyiv, which once seized power, is gradually turning into a terrorist organization, and its sponsors are becoming accomplices to terrorists.
Interesting. Then, how would he describe what the Russians are doing on Ukrainian territory? As we can see, they interpret their own actions as completely justified, while everything Ukraine does is labeled as escalation. Friends, don't forget to write your opinion in the comments. Unfortunately, Trump has no leverage over Putin. That much is now clear, and that's why the war continues. Putin also stated that he doesn't want to hold talks with Zelenskyy.
Let's recall that not long ago, the Ukrainian authorities and their allies were dreaming of a strategic defeat for Russia on the battlefield. Today, amid heavy losses and retreating along the entire front line, the Kyiv leadership has shifted to organizing terrorist attacks, while at the same time requesting a ceasefire for 30 or even 60 days, asking for a high-level meeting. But how can such meetings take place under these conditions? What is there to talk about? Who negotiates with those who bet on terror? And what should they be rewarded for? For providing a pause in fighting that will be used to funnel more Western weapons to the regime, to continue forced mobilization, and to prepare more terrorist attacks like those carried out in the Bryansk and Kursk regions.
As you can see, when Putin needed to hold a parade, they asked Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire. But now they claim there is no reason for them to stop. Overall, Ukraine made a big mistake by allowing them to hold that parrot and agreeing to Russia's terms. Moreover, while continuing his human wave assaults, Putin claims that it's Ukraine that doesn't want peace.
The current Kyiv regime has no need for peace at all. For them, peace probably means losing power. And power, it seems, is more important to them than peace or the lives of the people whom, judging by their actions, they don't even consider their own.
Frankly, it's difficult to comment on such statements without getting emotional, so friends, I leave that to you. Make sure to share your thoughts in the comments. And now let's move straight to the situation at the border because Russian forces are advancing rapidly and establishing a buffer zone. Just yesterday, there was confirmed progress, quite significant, and nearly 4 villages in this direction fell under Russian control. The attacks are ongoing. According to Ukrainian soldiers, the primary goal of the Russians is to reach the village of Khotyn, and from there, the outskirts of the city of Sumy, which is just 13 kilometers away, they're also planning to aggressively target the city with FPV drones. The situation continues to deteriorate, and so far, Ukrainian forces haven't been able to stop the Russian advance. To help you understand how quickly the front is collapsing here, Ukrainian troops were already reporting last night that Russian forces might soon reach Malakurchakivka and Khotyn. Sumy direction. Russian naval infantry has fully taken control over Kindrativka. Our soldiers attempted a counterattack, but it failed, and we had to fall back into defensive positions, which unfortunately didn't work in our favor. There are only about 5 kilometers left to the neighboring village of Khotyn. We need to do everything we can to stop them there. The Russians have already started using FPV drones to test targeting in the city. They are reaching the area but not yet hitting their intended targets. That's why they need to push through the south. Yesterday, the Russians completed stabilization efforts and fully entrenched themselves in Andriivka. They've also begun pressing into the southern part of Oleksiivka, and by the evening, they might be able to secure it and immediately start moving toward Malakurchakivka. Meanwhile, fighting has begun for Yablonivka. The situation is extremely tense. The Russians are pushing from the north and east. If the Russians capture this village, they could cut off the logistics route from the west to Yunakivka. In fact, there are already counterattacks happening on the northern outskirts of the settlement. The Russians are trying to break through undercover. It's crucial for them now to reinforce this flank in order to encircle the villages near the forest and establish a platform for launching attacks on the city, just as they are planning to do in Khotyn. As you can see, this is a complete disaster and the front is collapsing rapidly. Village after village, the Russians continue to take control. On the Kharkiv front, Russian forces continue shelling the city, but there have been no new assaults along the front line. For now, the situation remains unchanged. Fighting in Vovchansk is ongoing with renewed attacks on the nearby Vovchansky Khutori settlement. However, over the past 24 hours, there have been no territorial changes on the front line. In the Dvorichna direction, Russian forces are maintaining the offensive pressure and trying to break through from multiple directions on a daily basis. Today, they launched attacks near Kamyanka, but so far the front line is holding steady. In the Kupiansk direction, Russian forces are conducting assaults near Peshane and Stepovanovoselivka. However, over the past 24 hours, the front line has remained unchanged, with all Russian attacks successfully repelled. In the Borova direction, the Russians are storming Boguslavka and Novakrugliakivka, but aside from these assaults, there is no significant activity in this area, and the front line remains unchanged for now. In the Liman direction, the situation is once again deteriorating. Russian forces have managed a significant breakthrough, advancing approximately 4.5 kilometers, and have completely captured Redkodub, as confirmed by the Russian Ministry of Defense. They also pushed into Karpivka, where the situation is reportedly worse than it appears on the maps. In reality, Russian troops are present in most of the village, and Ukrainian forces are targeting them with FPV drones. Clearly, the Russians are making gains here, effectively reclaiming territory previously liberated by the Ukrainian counteroffensive. There is also heightened offensive activity near the villages of Kolodyazi, Zelena Dolina, Glushenkove, Novy Mir, and Olhivka. We are closely monitoring how the situation unfolds. In the Siversk direction, Russian forces are assaulting Grigorivka and conducting shelling. However, Russian activity has decreased here and no territorial changes have been observed over the past 24 hours. In the Chasiv Yar direction, Russian forces continue their assaults on the central part of the town. They are also attempting breakthroughs near Bila Hora, Druzhba, and Krymsk. So far, no confirmed territorial gains have been made by the Russians, but the activity remains high. The objective appears to be advancing toward the outskirts of Kostantinivka. Near the Klebenbyk reservoir, Russian forces are pushing toward Yablonivka, storming Sherbinivka, and continue attacks on Rusin Yar. Additionally, heavy shelling continues across the area. However, no changes in the front line have been observed over the past 24 hours, as Ukrainian forces have managed to repel all attacks. In the Pokrovsk direction, Russian forces continue assaults near Nova Poltavka, storming Malinivka, Mirolyubivka, Lysivka, and Chunishine, and are pushing toward the outskirts of Pokrovsk. They are also attacking Udachne and Novosergiyevka. Heavy shelling of frontline settlements continues. However, the front line remains unchanged for now, and the Ukrainian forces are holding the defense. Reports from Ukrainian soldiers on the ground note that while there are no major changes, the Russians are gradually advancing. The situation remains tense, and developments are being closely monitored. In the Novopavlivka direction, battles continue for Novomykolаivka, and Russian forces are attempting to break through near Kotlarivka. Elsewhere in this sector, activity has temporarily decreased, though heavy shelling persists. There have been no changes along the front line over the past 24 hours. In the Velika Novosilka direction, Russian forces are not conducting new assaults at the moment, but artillery preparation is ongoing in advance of future attacks. FPV drones continue to be actively used. In the Gulay-Pole area, the situation is similar. No new assaults have been recorded, but shelling continues and the front line remains unchanged. In the Zaporizhia direction, Russian forces are assaulting Sherbaki and Stepove and conducting heavy shelling. However, they have been unable to break through, and Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling all attacks. The front line hasn't changed over the past 24 hours. In the Kherson direction, Russian forces continue attacking the islands and shelling the right bank of the Dnipro River. Over the past day, no changes have been recorded, and the Russians are still unable to advance onto the right bank. Meanwhile, bad news continues for Ukraine. This time, a default has been declared. S&P Global has declared a default on Ukraine's GDP warrants. The international rating agency CNP Global downgraded Ukraine's GDP-linked bond rating from CC to D default. Ukraine missed a $0.67 million payment on its GDP warrants that was due on June 2nd, 2025. Friends, feel free to share your opinion in the comments below. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.